Jill Parekh, welcome to the Untrivial Podcast. How are you doing today?
I am great. How are you today, Allie?
I am doing well. Thank you so much for being here. I am really looking forward to our conversation today, and specifically the topic that we're talking about, which is confidence and imposter syndrome. And I think that
Mhm.
that's something that so many people, especially women, can relate to, just this feeling of like, oh, am I doing the right thing? Am I in the right rooms? Do I have the, background to be able to do what I'm doing or be here and speak with authority here? And you're someone that I follow who just has that in spades, like so much
Oh, thank
confidence,
you.
so much self-assuredness. And I just can't wait to dive in to hear about how you develop that for yourself, but also how women and others can cultivate that for themselves in their lives as well.
Mhm.
I would love if you could share a little bit about your background and what got you into the world of coaching.
Yeah. So in 2017, I finished my degree. And before I was even done my master's degree, I saw like a YouTube video of Tony Robbins. And I actually found coaching that way. So it was so interesting because I was going to go into becoming a therapist, but I found like the confines and the restriction of therapy and like the supervision and that kind of stuff. It didn't really align with the direction that I wanted to go, but I thought it was really like the only option. So when I found coaching, I felt like, oh, like this is an opportunity for me to do this work and an opportunity for me to like make the money that I really wanted to make and to own my own coaching business as well. Because when you're a coach, like it's not just about coaching, you're also like running a business, right? So,
Yeah.
and I think a lot of people like get that mixed up. Like they want to be a coach, but then they don't want to do like the business side of things. But I've always like really like leaned towards that. And I've always wanted to work for myself. And I also have ADHD. So I've always wanted to be in control of my own time and not really have to like answer to anybody. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
and even though I jumped directly into it, I was still working for the government and I had been working for the government for a couple of years up until that point. And then I took my coaching business full time in 2021. However, up until that point, I had been working full time. So I had been working like 40 to 50 hours a week and doing my coaching on the side. So that's how I got started.
Wow,
Mhm.
congratulations. And
Thank
so
you.
interesting that you wanted to go into the therapeutic space and then decided to pivot away from that. I am personally someone who's very interested in the therapeutic space. We have a lot of
Yeah.
psychotherapists on the show for sure, but
Love that. Yeah.
you're right. I think there is, and again, there's obviously ethical reasons and a lot of rules around it for sure that
A thousand
are
percent.
totally, we need to respect. But you do lose a little bit of your ability to lean into your personality and lean
Mhm.
into that real talk that I think your page and your business is so about. It's
I'd
being
be a
really
terrible
honest.
therapist because I'd be like, "Can I just tell you what I think you should do, please?"
Uh,
And that's not what therapy is?
right. Right. So it's a
Yeah.
totally different approach to supporting others and helping people. And I guess like, just for the audience, like how would you describe the difference between a therapist and a coach? Because a lot of people might get those
Good
two things
question.
mixed up, but they're very different.
Yeah, so I think, to me personally, therapy feels like a lot of, going back into the past and understanding patterns of behavior and how we came to be how we are currently, and, like, learning how we develop the stories that we develop about ourselves. Whereas with coaching, it's more of like a forward thinking container in terms of we are thinking about the future, like how can we take action now? How can we create the future identity versus spending a lot of time in what has happened in our like childhood and all of that kind of stuff. So I definitely think that therapy has its time, but for me, I find that when I want to like move forward and take action, I lean more into coaching than I would with therapy.
Gotcha.
Mhm.
Awesome.
Yeah.
No, that's really interesting. So, in terms of who you coach and your clientele, tell us a little bit about your specialty.
So I focus on imposter syndrome. Imposter syndrome is like the feeling that you're not as like competent or as successful as others perceive you to be, despite a lot of evidence of your accomplishment. So I help entrepreneurs, like coaches and service providers, overcome that feeling of not being enough so they can show up, be seen, market their services, and essentially like sign clients into their own businesses. So as I was saying, imposter syndrome is that feeling of like not being as competent or successful as others may perceive you to be. And it's that inner voice that says like, who do you think you are? Or you're going to get found out. And there is a real fear that people are like eventually going to see through you and realize that you're not as competent or you're not as strong, not as smart, not as capable as you are showing yourself to be. And it can be characterized by things like people pleasing, perfectionism, all because you think you're trying to like keep up this facade or you think you have to, and you feel like you're not good enough. And if you slip, if you show a sign of weakness, or if you like admit that you're not good at something or you need help, someone is going to see a flaw or a weakness and think like she can't handle that or she's not good enough. And I think that this is relevant even if you've achieved real success, right? Like I have clients all the time who are super successful, whether it's hitting like a milestone in their business, like making a certain amount of money or signing a client, or whether you're in corporate and you're getting recognized for your work or getting a really good performance review, but it actually it starts to feel like, oh, like this is a fluke, they don't see the real me, and you aren't actually thinking that the evidence you have and the accomplishments you have are like true or a real representation of who you are.
Mm. Yeah, I feel like a lot of people can resonate with that and have felt that
Mhm.
either currently or in the past. And it's just something that I think a lot of people deal with. And why do you think people get into that place? Like what is it about our accomplishments or successes that we don't feel like we can attribute to our own doing and our own skill? Like why do we want to put it out as, oh, it was a fluke, or no, I'm actually not that smart, or they're
Yeah.
thinking way higher of me than I actually am. Like what causes that?
Right. So, um, I see, like, I pretty much only coach women at this time. And something that women have is an overactive error detection. It's like, it's called the anterior cingulate cortex, and it's this like filter inside our brain, and it's responsible for figuring out mistakes. So women have a more overactive anterior cingulate cortex, which means that we're more naturally likely to overanalyze decisions, second guess our success, and really focus on the things that aren't working, the things we're not doing good in, instead of the things that we are. And also, women also have lower testosterone levels. And testosterone is sometimes linked to risk taking and confidence when it's spread over a period of time. So men can naturally have more of it, obviously.
Yeah.
So this can make women feel a little bit less certain about themselves and a little bit more hesitant to take action. So there's also this theme with clients that I specifically work with who start to get like a bit older and their like frontal lobe is more developed, and it's almost like they become even more hyper aware of themselves and how they're being perceived. And sometimes it's actually harder to be seen now that they're older than when they were younger. And then, of course, we have the socio-emotional part of it too. So we have childhood experiences and conditioning that we received as we were being raised, like these stories that we received around our worthiness and if we were good enough, etc. So, for example, I personally grew up in a house where if we weren't like being active or doing something like at the time, if we were like relaxing, it was like, why are you being lazy? That is something that I carried into my personal life as I got older, like feeling like as long as I was doing something, like I was being productive and adding to my life, etc. Right? Or people find worthiness in being able to tackle things all on their own and not needing to ask for help. So this can turn into a lot of issues as you get older. Like that's when you start to see some of these patterns that you picked up from childhood happen and occur, where you're like killing yourself trying to do it all and take it all on without asking for help because you're afraid to be seen, like you need to ask for help.
Hmm. Yeah, that was such a great breakdown. Thank you so much for walking us through that.
You're welcome.
And so interesting that there's a biological component as well as the cultural component. I
For
wasn't even
sure.
thinking biology, but you're
Yeah.
right. I think especially that point about testosterone and just like that confidence, that aggression, that, what did you say? Risk
Uh,
taking. Yes, exactly,
risk
that
taking.
risk
Yes.
taking, because
Yeah.
that is definitely gotta be a big part of it, so thank you for walking us through that, and you mentioned a little bit about your own experience. Productivity was seen as something of really high value in your household, like, have
Mhm.
you ever experienced imposter syndrome? Like, obviously, you're someone
Yes.
now, you own your own business, you help others build their own confidence and fight their own
Mhm.
imposter syndrome, like, what's your story with imposter syndrome?
Yeah, so, like, when I was getting my school degrees, like, I was in my residency for my master's degree, and somebody was talking about how their friend tried to get in and they weren't able to get into the particular course, and I was thinking like, "Oh, like, they actually picked me over someone that, like, was also trying to get into the course." So, I had these feelings of, like, not feeling enough and feeling like, I didn't fit in, etcetera, so I felt like I was, like, putting on a performance and people were gonna be able to, like, figure out that I wasn't as smart as I was, like, pretending to be, and then when I actually, like, Googled some of the things that I was feeling and thinking, it was like, "Oh, this is imposter syndrome." So that was years ago in my early 20s, and then I started working for the government, and I still felt that way whenever I would compete for jobs and do that kind of stuff. And then when I started my own coaching business, I was like, oh my God, like I could really feel it. And I just didn't have the terminology for it until I was in university. And as soon as I knew that, like, okay, this isn't something that's actually internalized to me. It's something that is just like a dysfunctional thinking pattern. It's a learned behavior. I started realizing that, like, this is something that a lot of other people have, and they think, especially when they run their own business and they're trying to show up and sell their services, etc. So I really had to overcome it. And in learning how to overcome it, I kind of found that unique angle of helping entrepreneurs with it too. And I started realizing like, oh my God, like this is a big thing that people really let hold them back when it comes to showing up for themselves, showing up for their services, charging what their work is actually worth. And that's how I kind of like came into talking about it specifically for entrepreneurs.
I love that, and I think there's something obviously so important about going through something yourself and being able to help others because you
Mhm.
can just relate. Like if you've dealt with it, if you've overcome it, when someone comes to you and is like, "I feel like such a fraud," you're not coming from a place of like, "Girl, why?" It's like, "I get
Yep.
it. I've
Yeah.
been there too."
Totally.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you almost have had to go through something like that to be able to get it and help people in their journeys for sure.
Mhm.
I've heard that there are 5 types of imposter syndrome. Can we walk through those together?
Yeah, so I think that you're specifically talking about Dr. Valerie Young's work, and that is the secret thoughts of successful women. And she coined 5 different types of imposter syndrome. And from what I know about them, they are the perfectionist, the expert, the natural genius, the soloist, and the superwoman. So the perfectionist is, again, you feel like you need to be perfect. You set really high standards for yourself, you set unrealistic standards for yourself, and you feel inadequate, right? The next one is the expert, and that is when you feel like you need to know everything and be everything and have all of the information in order to be good enough. You don't even really want to speak up or say that you know anything unless you feel like you know all of it, right? And
Mm.
then we have the natural genius, and that is when you think that like success should be easy. It should come to you easily, that things should come to you easily, and if they don't, if you actually have to like work at things, you're doing something wrong, or you're actually not as smart or as capable as people think you are. Then we have the soloist, and that is when you feel like you need to do everything on your own. So asking for help is like a fucking crime, like because it's going to expose you as not being good enough or capable enough. And then finally we have the superwoman, and that is when you feel like if you're not working hard, you're not worth anything. So you need to be productive. You need to work super hard, harder than anyone else works. So those are the five types coined by Dr. Valerie Young. And I definitely see each of these types in a lot of the clients that I work with. And usually they have like a combination of a couple of them. Sometimes they have all of them. And this is actually one of the books that I read at the very beginning of my journey in becoming a coach and deciding to niche down on imposter syndrome. I distinctly remember like reading it on the plane when I was going on a family vacation in like 2019. And that's when I like could pick up a lot of these similarities, but between like the things she was talking about and entrepreneurship specifically. And something that I've really taken away from her work is the fact that she sees imposter syndrome as a learned behavior. So it's not something that is an actual character flaw. It's not something that you just have because you're not good enough. It's an actual like learned behavior, learned through your experiences and learned through the way your like brain chemistry works.
Interesting.
Mhm.
Thank you so much for walking through those. I feel like listeners could probably be like, oh, oh, that might be me. Oh, I've
Totally.
definitely been there.
I've had all of them,
But if it is a
honestly.
learned behavior, can we learn to not have imposter
Yeah.
syndrome? Can we teach ourselves out of this?
Yeah, yeah. So the work that I do with clients is like a mixture of like a subconscious reprogramming, nervous system regulation, and strategy that they need to grow their business and make the money that they're looking to make. So subconscious reprogramming is essentially changing the way the neurons fire in your brain. So it's changing your thoughts. It's essentially changing your self concept. So you really do see yourself as capable and as good enough. And it's changing the thoughts that you have about yourself each and every day, right? Because you only feel like a fraud because you think you're a fraud, right? Your thoughts are always creating your
Right.
feelings and they are like explicitly connected. So having the information that we have about imposter syndrome, that it is a learned behavior and that it is not the truth about you, and that rather it's just a dysfunctional way of thinking, which is something that I describe in my own book called You're Not Special. It's just a dysfunctional way of thinking. So I also do nervous system regulation with my clients too. And that is essentially like really feeling and processing their emotions and allowing them to just like pass through and not making how they feel mean anything about their worth, etc. So even if they have a hard day, even if they're feeling like a certain way, they're not turning it in, into reasons as to why they're not good enough, and they're not like weaponizing how they feel against themselves. And then, of course, we have like the strategic part of things where we can't just hope that once we start thinking a certain way, everything is just going to happen, right? We have to like take action. And a lot of this work is done in the actual action part of things. And that means like learning how to charge adequately for your services and not undercharging yourself. It means learning to like deliver services to our clients without over delivering when we're not being paid adequately. And one of the core things that I tell clients is like, don't make it mean anything. So whatever circumstance happens, like it's really important to not turn it around on yourself and make it mean something about your worthiness. Don't tell yourself like, this is why I'm not good enough. Like this wouldn't be happening to me if I
Mm,
was good enough, right? That's imposter syndrome, right? That is not true, because there's a lot of things that occur in running a business that are very normal, that are very standard. It happens to everybody. But when you feel like a fraud, it's very easy to internalize those things. Like when you feel like a fraud, when you feel like an imposter, it's even easier to internalize all of these things because you're equating the things that happen to how you actually do see yourself. And that's why I was talking about we need to work on changing your self concept and how you see yourself.
yeah. Oh my gosh. I love the way you're describing this. I feel like you're breaking it down in such a understandable way for people because it's like I feel like I know what imposter syndrome feels like,
Mm.
but I never really thought about how connected it is to self-worth, confidence, the way that we frame if a mistake happens, that it falls on us rather than that's just the reality of what happens sometimes. Like things don't go
Totally.
perfectly, and it might not have anything to do with you. But I think people with imposter syndrome, and I've definitely been there, it's like, oh, that was my fault, or like that's because of
Mhm.
me, because what am I, who do I think I am? Like that just resonates so deeply. So one of the things you just mentioned there was this idea of changing that narrative and changing our subconscious thoughts around how we view ourselves. Is that done through affirmations or like how do you start to change that dialogue that's happening in your head?
Yeah, so in terms of actual coaching, it's like having that conversation with somebody who can like offer a different perspective and reframe the things that you're thinking and the things you're feeling. You can do it through journaling. You can do it through subconscious reprogramming techniques. You can do it through affirmations, through subliminals as you sleep. So there's like tons of opportunities for you to do it subconsciously. And then consciously, I would say that coaching is a huge aspect to that, but also just like becoming really hyper aware of your thoughts and how you are speaking to yourself. So, like, specifically your dialogue with yourself and how you're talking to yourself all day, because all day we are having thoughts, we are having thousands of thoughts. And I think that first step is realizing like you can't always choose your first thought, but you can always choose your second thought, and realizing that the thoughts in your head are not something that you can't control. It's actually a conversation that you're having with yourself. So you can choose how you speak to yourself. You can choose to speak to yourself with kindness, with compassion, with understanding. Like something that I used to do in the beginning when I was overcoming imposter syndrome, and something that I constantly am telling clients about, is like being able to speak to yourself as if you didn't have the thoughts of I'm not good enough or I'm a fraud. Like if those thoughts never even crossed your mind, how would you interpret this situation or this circumstance that's happening?
Yeah, absolutely. I love the idea of like almost interrupting that thought pattern
Mhm.
of, something happens, you start to take it on as a you problem, and then you have to kind of stop yourself and be like, okay, is there another reason that could be the culprit of
Yeah.
why this happened that has nothing to do with the fact that I'm not good enough? And I bet
Right.
you there's there's definitely going to be one. People will find those. That's so true. Um, do you believe in the concept of faking it until you make it?
I believe in fake it till you make it to a degree. Like, I think that the goal is always authenticity. So the goal is to recognize your accomplishments and to believe the evidence that you get. But I also know that I was able to resolve a lot of my imposter syndrome through action. So I think it's okay to be a work in progress and to be working on the things that you need to work on internally at the same time as taking the action. Because if I would have like waited out my imposter syndrome and needed to be perfect before I sold my first offer, like I wouldn't have been able to achieve all the things I achieved, right? Because we start to create our self concept through the evidence that we create for ourselves. So once I started to get that evidence, I started to see that people wanted to work with me and that I actually was really good at the work that I was doing. But that had to come from me taking action, even if I wasn't like 100% confident. So I don't think it's necessarily fake it till you make it. I think it's until you are.
That's such a good point. I think when we're talking specifically about entrepreneurship, because I think
Mhm.
that's a very unique place where there's peaks and valleys. And sometimes, and again, valleys, natural part of entrepreneurship. But when you're in a moment in your business where it's like, maybe it's a slower month or you're having a slump, it seems like it might be harder to not take that on as a personal failure, mainly because A, you're the one running that business.
For sure.
B, like you're in control, it must feel like. And so if you've had really successful times, you must be like, well, I'm doing something different or wrong that's contributing to the fact that I'm not being
Sure.
successful this month. So, like, how do you support people when it's almost like they have to take it on as partly a them thing because they're the one operating and running that business and being that entrepreneur?
Sure.
Like, that's kind of fall on their shoulders to a
For
degree.
sure.
I assume it would be harder to almost like decompartmentalize those two things.
Yeah, and I think that there is a stark difference between taking responsibility and feeling shame. And I think sometimes people like get those two wrapped up in each other. And they think like, okay, like if I have to take responsibility for the way things have been going, like then it's been evident that I'm not good enough or I don't know what I'm doing or I caused whatever is happening. But I see it as like you're taking responsibility in a very like empowering kind of way in terms of like you can completely turn it around. And I find whenever a client has like an income dip or they're going through something hard like that, it usually has to do with like their confidence and something slipped in terms of like their confidence, whether it's working with clients and like potentially a client didn't get a result and they made it mean something about them and it just like started this like downward spiral. So it's always like, okay, how about we forget what has happened even like yesterday and how can we just move forward now? Who do you need to be and what are the things that we need to step into? And again, we're doing all of that without feeling like shame at all.
Yeah, so true. I love that breakdown because you even just called me out in doing it. Like I was definitely wrapping those two things up in like responsibility and like feeling
Totally.
that. Like it's
Because
it's
like
such a
it's
natural thing to tie, but you're right. Like shame is so different than accountability. And like we
right,
wouldn't we wouldn't loop those two things together
but
in
it
other
can feel like
situations.
that, especially like when everything is about like, okay, like we have to do like the marketing and the selling and the client acquisition and like all of these things that it can really start to feel like heavy, but like it has to be like something that you like take radical responsibility for because like you and you only are responsible for your success. And
Yeah.
that can be scary.
Yeah. Do you ever have people write down or somehow quantify like the good or the wins or the things that show them like you're killing it. Like, do you ever do that? Because I feel like sometimes
A
for
thousand
me,
percent.
if I can write down or like make a list of some things that I'm proud of, I can look at that and be like, right, okay, no,
Right,
fine.
right. Yeah, so it's actually so simple, but like people forget and they just like don't look at those things. Like when my clients struggle with feeling like an imposter, something that is so hard for them is to like recognize the things that they have achieved or that they have done in the past. It's almost as if because they struggle with imposter syndrome, it kind of like clears out their brain of like anything they've done that they could take into consideration because they almost forget. And again, that is imposter syndrome where you're not counting the stuff that's happened before. Like your worthiness feels like it's in the future. So you think that you're like only as worthy as the things that you can achieve now. But then every time you're achieving things, you're starting to have that standard move farther and farther away for what's deemed as good enough. Because again, it doesn't fit the identity you have of yourself, right? So it's super important to have some kind of like accomplishment journal or a folder where you can like go through your client success and your success and the things that you've achieved because like that is how you can see like, oh, the thoughts that I'm having really aren't true.
Totally. When I was in my corporate job, I had like a yay folder. It was just
Oh, that's
yay.
so cute.
And
Yeah.
anytime I got like positive feedback or like really big kudos,
That's
I
so
would put
smart.
everything in the yay folder. And then if I was ever having a bad day, I could just go look in it and be like, you know what? It's not all bad. It's okay. You're doing
Right.
good. But yeah, you're right. It's almost like what we were just talking about. You can take accountability for the things that go wrong, but you're not taking accountability for all the things that are going
A
right. And
thousand
it's
percent.
like we blame ourselves for the lows, but we'll attribute the highs to something outside of us, which is just so interesting. I know we just talked a little bit about an accomplishment journal or a yay folder. Do you have any other tips for people in terms of continuing to build their confidence or get
Yeah.
out of their head?
So something that I used to do very early on as a coach, and I used to tell clients to do also, is give their inner imposter a name, their
Mm.
inner critic. So I personally had Rhonda. So she was my inner imposter. And I would go on Instagram stories and I would like put on like a face filter on like fucking Snapchat or something. And I would be like, I'm Rhonda. It was crazy. I'm like, how come I did that? That's so funny. But so I used to like talk about how like Rhonda said this and Rhonda said that, but it was just how I could externalize the thoughts that I was having and to separate them from like who I was working towards being. So to remind myself that I actually wasn't a fraud and these were just thoughts that my imposter syndrome was just trying to tell me was the truth, right? So if that's helpful for you to externalize that voice and to remind yourself that it's not actually you and it's not actually true about you.
I love that tip. It's like naming and then putting that person outside of the real you.
Yeah.
Any other tips?
Yeah. I also would say having like that awareness to your thoughts and like just realizing like if you were to catalog or write down the thoughts that you had each day, like I had a client actually do this where like she kind of like reviewed all the thoughts she had about herself like over 24 to 48 hours. And she was like, I did not realize how much I criticized everything that I was doing and the thoughts that I had about myself. So, like, learning how to be really aware of the conversation you're having with yourself as well, too.
Definitely. One thing I do want to talk about before we wrap up, because I think it's very interesting, specifically in the world of entrepreneurship, is charging for your services. And like, if there is one thing where you are trying to like quantify your worth and put it out into the world, it can feel so terrifying to be like, this is what I charge for
Yeah.
my time and for my service.
Mhm.
And I've definitely heard women definitely speak about um like just how nerve-wracking that is, or people try and negotiate down the price or challenge you on
Crazy.
that. Like, how do you first give yourself permission to charge what you think your true value is, or really kind of get
Mhm.
into that space of, no, I am worth this amount. And
Yeah.
B, how do you stand firm on that if people question or challenge that price?
That's interesting because I find that people that have challenged what I'm charging usually aren't my ideal client. So it's usually like people who are like external to me, like maybe like extended like friends or extended family who have like figured out what I charge or something. And they're like, that's crazy. And it's like, but it's not crazy for the coaching industry too. And I think too that you have to start somewhere where you're comfortable. And like, for example, in 2019, I had like a $25 group program that I sold. And like to me, even though it was obviously criminally low, to me, like that's what I felt comfortable charging. And then I was like, oh, like this is really not reflective of the time and the effort that I am putting into this kind of work. So I really think that you have to work your way up to something that you feel really comfortable talking about, but it just like pushes your comfort zone a bit. Because again, as women in the space, like it's very easy to devalue ourselves and our work, especially when it comes to like the services that women usually offer in terms of like helping and mental health and these like emotional kinds of services that like society has historically told us like aren't worthy of charging a certain amount or aren't actually like helpful. So I also think it's kind of like fuck you to the way that society has told us we should charge. And you just have to be comfortable with what you're charging and say it confidently, but also like realizing that your work is worthy of being adequately compensated for, and that you are doing really important work in the world, whether you're a coach, whether you're a therapist. And I think that it just seems so like radical to other people because they're not in it. And again, like I said, I haven't had anybody really challenge it unless they were like outside of the coaching industry.
Yeah, that's so true.
Mhm.
One of my guests a couple weeks ago, Christine McLean, she and her sister are travel content creators. And one thing she said, again, because they're in this space where they're choosing their rates and their
Mhm.
packages and their pricing. And she was kind of saying, like, the price is the price. You know, you don't go to a restaurant and ask for a discount on a burger. And I feel like that mentality is just like so, so smart. It's like we we accept what prices are in
Right,
so many other areas of the world. Like, why do people think they can challenge this price for this
right.
person? You know what I mean? Like, that's
Mhm.
just an interesting thing to think about that people,
Mhm.
want to kind of, I don't know if they want to devalue your work, but like it seems that way if they're trying to get a deal and it's like, no, I'm telling you how much this costs and is worth
Yeah.
to me and you. Like, I don't know, I would feel almost hurt or, like, insulted if someone was trying
Mhm.
to, like, bring my rates
Yeah, it
down.
is insulting. Yeah.
Yeah. And that made me think too, like, in terms of, like, mantras or things you
Mhm.
tell people to say to themselves, do you have any? Because, like, one that helps me, at least just, like, going after things, me and my husband say it all the time, it's just like, "Shoot or shoot." And it's like, what's the worst that can happen is, like, you miss or someone says no. Okay,
Yeah.
you're exactly where you started to begin with, and it's like, why would you not take those chances? Or, like,
Right.
almost like just having that audacity. And a lot of people say, like, men just have this audacity about them, and it's like, women just need more audacity.
For
Because
sure.
if you actually think about it in the world, it's not audacity. That's the way half the population is operating. You're just, like, bringing yourself up to that level of, like,
Right.
regular standard behavior. So just, like,
100%.
feel like you're having audacity because you're probably not.
Totally, yeah. I think for me, I would say, like, it's always working. It is, like, huge for me because, like, as an entrepreneur, as an online entrepreneur, like, it can be really easy to think, like, your efforts and the things you're doing, like, aren't creating your results, but, like, what people don't realize about the online industry is that like it's always working, it's always compounding. And if you just like continuously work towards that and see like every little action you're taking, every time you do the work on your confidence and your self concept, that it's all working towards like the greater good and the result that you're looking for.
I love that. If listeners could take one thing away from you and our conversation today, what would you want it to be?
Yeah, so I think like specifically talking about imposter syndrome, like I think it's good to remember that it is a learned behavior. It is just like a dysfunctional way that you've learned how to think, and it's not your truth. It's not what's actually true about you, and that you're only like making your experience here on earth, and whether you're an entrepreneur or not, like you're only making it harder for yourself because you're internalizing these thoughts, and that you're actually a lot more capable and worthy and you even realize that you have to be the person to realize that. And so you can take the action and like move towards the things that you're looking to create, because as soon as you actually start to do them, you're like, oh, this actually wasn't as scary as I thought it would be. So that's what I would say.
Amazing. Where can people find out more about you, get connected, and learn about your coaching services? You also have a podcast, so like let's just talk about all of your things.
Yeah, so if you're an entrepreneur, you can find me at the From Imposter to Empowered podcast. It has over 120,000 downloads. And as I said, in this interview, I wrote and self-published a book called You're Not Special, and that's all about overcoming imposter syndrome and stepping into your worthiness. You can get that on Amazon. And then I'm on Instagram at your coach Jill. So you can head over there, check me out, check my content and all my offers as well.
Amazing. Jill, thank you so much for being here today. It was
Thank
so
you for
great
having me,
chatting with
Allie.
you. And I feel like you've just shared so much great insight about imposter syndrome and how we can just get out of our heads and go after what we want, and we deserve it.
Yes, 100%. Thank you for having me, Allie.